All right, we are going to do the Chapter 10 Technology Activities. Chapter 10, there's not a lot of things that you can do on your graphing calculator, but I'm going to show you a few of them that you can. First of all, we are going to draw a scatter plot. So in order to draw the scatter plot, we have to enter our x values into list 1 and our y values into list 2 by hitting stat and then 1 for edit. So again, on my calculator, I'm going to hit stat. Choice number 1 is edit, so I'm going to do choice number 1. If I have stuff in my list, I'm going to cursor up to the top, hit clear and enter, and then cursor up to the top, hit clear and enter. So now I can put my data in. I'm going to move my calculator while I do this, but we are going to put in 43, 48, 56, 61, 67, and 70 in list 1, list 2, 128, 120, 135, 143, 141, 152. And so I've got my data in list 1 and list 2. Wait for it to focus here. And once I have my data in list 1 and list 2, I'm going to do the stat plot. Just like when we did the histogram and the stem and leaf plots, we are going to go ahead and hit the second function button and then the y equals, which says stat plot above it. So second function y equals, and right now all of my plots are off. I'm going to do plot 1, so I'm going to hit number 1. And if you do have any that are on, turn them off, except for number 1 can be on, because we got to turn that one on anyway. So 1, I'm going to enter on the on, and then it says down for type. If I am going to do a scatter plot, I'm doing that very first one. It looks like a whole bunch of dots, so the first one is the one I want to enter on. My X list is list 1, my Y list is list 2. If those aren't on there, you're going to do second function 1 to get list 1, second function 2 to get list 2. You can have your marks. I'm just going to use the first one if you want to change it to a different one, and then you have the color in there. Now, in order to get the graph, you're going to hit the graph button. So I'm going to enter in there. All those are in there. I'm going to go over to the graph button, and when I hit graph, I see I have something in my y equals. I see a line come across there, so I'm going to hit just the plain y equals, and sure enough, I have something in there. I'm going to clear that out. Now I'm going to hit graph again. And sometimes when you hit graph, you'll see the dots, and sometimes when you hit graph, you don't, depending on your window. 2 ways you can fix your window. The quick way that we learned was to do the zoom button. So I'm going to hit zoom, and then do number 9 to zoom stat. Number 9 says zoom stat. And then you can see, there we go, I got my dots all on there. If you wanted to, you could also hit the window button. And on the window button, you can change your X minimum, X maximum, etc. if you wanted them to be nice whole numbers instead of decimal numbers. So maybe I want my minimum to be 40 and my maximum to be 75. The scale, maybe instead of the scale going up by 1, I want it to go up by 5s. My Y minimum again, maybe you want to put your Y minimum at, oh, let's say 100. And my Y maximum at, we'll go 160. We'll go 160. And then again, maybe I want to change my Y scale so it goes by 5s. And the rest of the stuff we can just leave on there. And when I do that now and I hit graph, I still have my same graph. My window's just slightly adjusted there. You can still see my points. So it should look something sort of like that. On the paper, I had you do the window at 30, X minimum, X maximum at 80, the scale of 10, and then the Y minimum 110, Y maximum 160, and Y scale 110. So again, I'm going to just hit the window button, and I'm going to change my values so they match the one on the paper. So X minimum, I put 30, X maximum, I used 80. My scale, I used 10. Y minimum, I used 110. Y maximum 160, hey, I guessed that one right, and Y scale we used 10 again. And so once I've changed my values there, that they match the ones on the paper, I'm going to go ahead and just hit the graph button again, and then you can see my dots. Should look fairly similar to what you had before, just maybe a little closer or spread out depending, but it should look like the one on the paper. So that's how we do the scatter plot. We use the stat plot button like we did before and use the scatter plot instead of the histogram or something else. So we are going to compute the sample correlation coefficient and the coefficients for the least square regression line. And so again, you have to have your data in your list. I'm going to hit stat in 1. We're going to just use that same exact list that we had before, so you don't have to re-enter anything. But if not, you would put your list in list 1 and list 2, X values in list 1, Y values in list 2. So now I'm going to hit the stat button. Stat. I'm going to cursor over to calculate. And what I want to calculate is number 8, the linear regression. The linear regression in the form of a plus bx. A being the y-intercept, b being the slope. Normally we have our equation in the form of y equals mx plus b. In this case, when you do the linear regression, you have your y-intercept and your slope switched around. And so we're going to do number 8. And the X list again is list 1, Y list is list 2. You can leave the frequency, and if you wanted to store the regression equation, you could do that. We're not going to do that right now, and we're going to just go down to calculate. So when you calculate, depending on your settings, you might just see the A and B value, and sometimes you will see your correlation coefficients, the R value and the R squared value. And so if you don't see those values, what you have to do is change your settings on your calculator and turn the diagnostic on. Probably for most of you, the diagnostic is turned off. I've already turned mine on. But what you do is you have to hit the second function button, and then you want the button that says catalog on it, and that's right above the 0. So see, there's the word catalog. When I do that, it gives me a list of all the functions on the calculator. Well, you have to go down to the one that says diagnostic on, so you have to cursor quite a way because they're in alphabetical order. And so once I get down here to the D's, there we go. Now I'm looking for diagnostic on. You can turn your diagnostic off, which it probably is right now, but we want it on, so I want the little arrow next to the word diagnostic on, and then I'm going to enter. Now it's turned on. It should stay on. And you have to enter on that one. It says diagnostic on your screen. Hit enter again so that it says done. Then you know for sure you have it turned on. So you enter, it'll show up on your screen. Hit enter again, should say the word done. Now if I go to the word stat and go over to calculate and do number 8 for my linear regression, it should again give you list 1, list 2, leaving the frequency list and storing the regression equation. Oops, I got rid of my list 1. So I have to hit second function 1, get list 1 back in there. I meant to cursor. I'm going to cursor down to calculate, and now when you calculate, you should see all 4 of those things. So if you only saw the A and the B, once you turn your diagnostics on, then you should see R squared and R being your regression correlation coefficient. So it says, what is the y-intercept of the regression line? The y-intercept, I'm going to just round that off. I'm going to have 81.048. 81.048. What is the slope of the regression? B is the slope. 0.964, again going 3 decimal places, 0.964. What is the equation of the regression line? So the equation of my regression line would be y equals 81.048 plus 0.964x. And then what's your correlation coefficient? That's the R value, and so 0.897, again rounding that to 3 decimal places. 0.897. And so on one of the problems on Alex, it's going to ask you, and sometimes it'll ask you for the slope, sometimes it'll ask you for the y-intercept, sometimes it asks you for the correlation coefficient, and sometimes it asks you for two of those items. And so that would be the way that you could do those without having to use all those formulas, unless you want to practice using the formulas. Also, just a note, watch for the negative signs. Sometimes the negative signs are really hard to read. In this case, we don't have any negatives, and so we're all right. But if you have a negative, watch for the negatives because they're pretty small when you put your values in your calculator. So if I want to plot my regression line on my scatter plot, what I'm going to do then is hit the y equals. There's the y equals. And that's how we get an equation for a line in there. So we could type the equation in that we wrote down for our linear regression equation, or we can have the calculator put that in there. To get the calculator to put it in there, you're going to hit the vars menu. So down here is my vars menu. And we are going to do number 5, which is the one that says statistics. We're going to use the statistics. Then what we're going to do is cursor over to EQ for equation. And we are going to do the regression equation. So regression equation is number 1. You can just cursor down or just hit number 1 to do the regression equation. And you can see they plopped the regression equation in there. And it doesn't have any rounded off values like when, well, it is rounded off, but it's not rounded off as far as we rounded it off. But if I cursor back, you can see here, my A value was 81.048 and so forth. And then my slope was the 0.964 and so forth. And so they just plopped the equation in there. Now when I hit graph, it puts my line in there and I can see the line of best fit or the regression line in my scatter plot if I would want to see that for some reason. And so looks pretty similar to that. Alrighty, I'm going to flip the page here on the notes. And so this next one is the bunch from your note sheet, your guided reading. So just so you can kind of compare some of the numbers and the answers from your guided reading, page 4 is where you did the scatter plot, and then on 9 you calculate the correlation coefficient, and then on 20 you do your line of best fit. And so I'm going to use this data here just to show you how the calculator goes and so that you can compare it to what you have on your guided reading pages. So again, I'm going to hit stat, and I'm going to hit number 1 to edit. And I'm going to clear out my 2 lists. And I am going to enter in my data. So the X values are the number of absences. So 6, 2, 15, 9, 12, 5, and 8. And then your Y values for list 2, 82, 86, 43, 74, 58, 90, and 78. So once again, when I have my data in my list, there we go. First thing I want to do is do my scatter plot. So I already have it set up to do the scatter plot, but I am going to hit Y equals and clear out the regression equation that's in there so that it doesn't show up when I hit graph. So I'm going to clear that out of there. And then I'm going to hit second function and stat plot. And my stat plot should be on. I've already got it set up to do it because we just did it before. The first one is my scatter plot. I have X list is list 1, list 2. I've got my marks. So all my data and information already is in there from before when I did my scatter plot. So I'm just going to hit graph now. And again, when I hit graph, I really don't see anything. So quick way to get my graph, zoom and 9. 9 is the zoom stat. And then there's my graph of my scatter plot. So I'm just going to pop this over or slide this over to my computer. Maybe you can see it. On page 4 of your notes, you have the scatter plot that we have on our notes. And then if I compare that, there's the scatter plot that I got on my graphing calculator. Should look fairly similar, other than I don't have all the nice labels and stuff like that that we have on page 4 there. So that's what we did on page 4, is we did our scatter plot of that data. So now I'm going to go ahead and slide to page 9 here. Let me do that quick. Probably a quicker way for me to get to page 9, but I'm just going to do it this way. So page 9 is when they did the correlation coefficient. So I'm going to slide down there to the correlation coefficient. And here again, when I do that, I already have my stuff in my list. I'm going to go to stat and 1 just to show you I still have the same values in my list. So I'm going to hit stat and go over to calc. And then I'm going to do number 8 for my linear regression equation, which is 8. And again, should be all set up for you. List 1, list 2, frequency list, store regression equation, and calculate. And when I calculate here, the only thing they were doing on that one is calculating the correlation coefficient, which is your R value. And you can see on our paper, if I move that and let it refocus, the R value down at the bottom was negative 0.944. The R value on our calculator, again, you see the negative, it's pretty small there, but negative 0.944. We get the same answer by doing that great big long equation or by using our calculator. So that's page 9 of your notes. And if I slide to page 20 of your notes, and actually it'll go to page 21, but page 20, you see that we have the same information again, and it wants you to find the regression equation. So if I slide down to page 21, actually page 22, I got to get to page 22 to get all the way to my regression equation. So they did all that work on page 21 and 20 and 21 to get to the regression equation. You can see the regression equation, y prime is 102.493 minus 3.622x. If I look at my graphing calculator at my data that I got when I did calculate 8, doing my linear regression, when I found my R value, my A value is my Y-intercept, 102.493 if I round that off to 3 decimal places. And my slope is my B value, negative 3.622. Again, I round that off to 3 decimal places. And those are the values that you have. If you do those great big calculations, if my thing refocuses here, maybe I'll zoom in a little bit on my screen. On page 22 of your note sheets, you can see you get the same value for your regression equation. And so I just wanted to point that out. So when you're doing your guided reading, I'll have the technology notes in there, but we've gone through them and you can kind of see how they work in order to do that. One last thing, again, if I would want to put my regression equation in my scatter plot, since we did that before, again, I am going to hit Y equals to get my graphing menu. And then I am going to go to the vars key down here, vars. I am going to do number 5 for statistics. And then I'm going to cursor over to the EQ for equation. And I'm going to hit number 1 to do my regression equation. And that's going to pop that equation into my Y equals. So that when I hit graph, I hit the word graph, now it is going to draw that line of best fit or that regression line in my scatter plot, and I can see how close my line of best fit fits in with my data. It looks pretty good. Alrighty, so those are the ones you have on your note sheet. So on the next page, here's one from Alex that I am going to have you do yourself. I gotta move my thing around again. This one has a lot longer list, but I'm gonna have you do this one. It says, for Major League Baseball teams, there is a relationship between the player payrolls and the gate. Is there a relationship between the player payrolls and gate money? Can't read today. Here are data for each of the American League teams for the year of 2000. The variable X denotes the 2000 player payroll in millions of dollars, and the variable Y denotes the mean attendance in thousands of fans for the 81 home games that year. The data are plotted in Figure 1. And on my printout, Figure 1's kind of hard to read because my printer needs some more ink. But the black shows up pretty good. But what you're going to do is go ahead and put your X values in list 1, the Y values in list 2. And then you're going to find on this one, it asks for the Y-intercept and the sample correlation coefficient. And then they may also ask for the slope, so go ahead and find the slope. So put your data in, then you're going to go to Stat, Calculate, and hit number 8, and you should be able to answer those 3 questions. So this is one that is on Alex, and will look like that. You can use your graphing calculator if you like, or if you want to practice using the formulas, you can use the formulas. And that's all I have for the technology activity. Like I said, most of the stuff on Alex you're not going to be able to use the graphing calculator for, but here's a few of them that you can.